Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
Today we're talking about the debt triangle in Venezuelan business. So the debt triangle on Venezuelan business is a concept that is very colloquially developed by my favorite Venezuelan economist, Asdrúbal Oliveros. So every time that man talks, I'm gonna listen sharply. And he developed this very simple concept of the debt triangle. There are the three major things that Venezuelan entrepreneurs and small business owners have to focus in order to remain competitive within the Venezuelan economy. And of course, depends on each sector, each industry, and so on. But there's a lot of nuances that you have to, well, if you're an entrepreneur, there is a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, a lot of nuances in order to solve your business and trying to be profitable. In this particular scenario within Venezuela, this economist, Asdrúbal Oliveros, that I respect a lot, developed this simple concept for his clients and his audience. And today I want to share with you guys the three things that compose the debt triangle in Venezuelan business. So the first one is competition. Well, what happened is just a few years ago, there was hardly no competition in Venezuela on the bottom of the market, 2018. And at that moment, on 2018, that's when the sentiment on small entrepreneurs and risk takers shifted and started, bringing some stuff, develop some business on the people that already had businesses that had a pretty rough decade on the 2010s. That's when their sentiment shifted. They went from survival mode to growth mode. So reinvesting on the business, on marketing and replenishing their stock and offering, more of a variety of goods and services, and so on and so on. So on 2023, there is a particular paradigm for these small and mid-sized entrepreneurs and business owners. What happens is the imports were very big. Imports of typical goods were a major deal since late 2017, early 2018, and so on. So there is a lot of imports of basic staples. Can be soft drinks, food items, products that you see on, any typical supermarket. Especially with Venezuela, what happens is the Venezuelan consumer craves a lot the American kind of consumption. Things that you see on Walmart, on Costco, on Publix, places like that. So there were a lot of shipments, a lot of these imported goods, like for instance, stuff like Nutella or Scotch or craft beer, and of course the typical, milk and dairy products and stuff like that, and cereals, and so on and so on. And of course, clothing apparel, tech gadgets, stuff like that. So what happened is the people in Venezuela, when they are selling the products, they have to compete, especially the ones who produce and manufacture food items or cheap clothing and apparel, stuff like that. They have to compete with the imports. So we have a lot of imports from the United States that are crave a lot for the Venezuelan consumer. Also, we have a lot of imports from China, cheap technology, cheap and knockoffs of clothing apparel, stuff like that. Not so much food items from China, but still we have those as well. Also from Turkey. Turkey, I explained a lot since 2017. Turkish products, you see them on the shelves on an average Venezuelan supermarket. And also Brazilian products lately, we have a bunch of those since 2017, especially on the south and the east side of the country. For instance, here in Nigeria, you see a lot of Brazilian products. Also lately, a bunch of Colombian products that we are seeing in Venezuela. So there is a lot of competition from imports and also from the informal market. That's one of the aristas of the triangle by Asdrúbal Oliveros. So what happens is that the domestic producer has to compete with those products that are usually cheaper, the unitary price, and have better quality. One of two, or probably they both combined. So the average producer in Venezuela, the typical producer, has to deal, the production costs are greater because there's a lot of frictions and not enough scale. So they struggle a lot with creating something with a reasonable unitary price for the right now domestic market. So that leads us to number two, that is cost. So cost, of course, is one of the cornerstones of business and economics and such. And what happens is that in Venezuela are even greater to deal with because there's a lot of frictions within your cost structure. So it's very hard to stay competitive regarding the market compared to the imports, compared to disloyal competition from the competitors. And what happens is, also I have to mention, and this is more of the private sector thing, that in Venezuela are expected, the mindset of the Venezuelan entrepreneur and investor and so on, they expect higher profit margins than the international standards, and that's something that is long gone. So what happens is, one is the mindset, and the other thing is that you have to deal with a bunch of moving parts. Most of them don't depend, of course, on the local producer, on the local entrepreneur. Like taxes, I'll say the Venezuela on taxes, I mean, you don't have to worry that much about taxes in Venezuela unless you have a physical business, a brick and mortar business. And of course, these people, the producers, the people who have stores and so on, they are retailers, they have a lot of tax expenses and tax costs involved because, they have the physical brick and mortar business. So what ends up happening is you have, a difficult tax structure. Also, you have a lot of frictions within the Venezuelan economy. Of course, you don't have scale, and you have to be competitive because the imports usually they come from, U.S., China, Brazil, Colombia, Turkey. They are competitive and they produce on a broader scale, so the unitary price is way better than the average Venezuelan producer. So the competition is fierce for the average Venezuelan producer. And number three is low purchasing power of the average Venezuelan. I explained this many, many times. The wealth gap, wealth inequality in Venezuela is dreadful. We have around 50% of the population that earns less than $100 per month. Some people earn, like $5 to $10 a month on bolivars, but that's kind of another thing. The people who are actually working get at least something around $100 per month. So after that, 50% of the population, that's kind of the earning. Then you have other 40%, so on, that makes between $100 and $300 per month. And that's not a great salary in Venezuela. I mean, getting a salary over $300 per month is very, very hard. However, it doesn't mean as much. You barely can cover basic expenses with that income. So at the end of the day, and you only have a handful, just let's say 5% of people who make over $1,000 per month. That's actually what you need, the threshold, the financial income that you need in order to have some decent standard of living in Venezuela. So what happens, over 90% of the people are impoverished, their purchasing power, the consumer levels are very low, are very decimated. They mostly can only cover the typical food staples, food items, and other discretionary spending. So the discretionary spending itself is very, very low. So they cannot expend in things like restaurants or clothing apparel, on tech gadgets, and so on and so on. So you need to maneuver, if you are doing business in Venezuela, you have to maneuver with a good competitive market price that serves these people, because and this comes from Asdrubal Oliveros himself, that the people, because they are poor, doesn't mean they don't consume. They have to consume. They are consumers, participating consumers on the market, but they consume different from, let's say, the middle class, the people who make $1,000 to $2,000 per month. So you need to create a structure in order to cater towards them. And that's a statement that I am completely 100% agree. So if you're a business, you produce or you sell or you commercialize on the wholesale, You need a structure with low margins, usually, but with a competitive price on basic necessities, staples like food items and medicine and cheap clothing apparel, stuff of that nature, stuff of that order, that when you figure it out, you are gonna be pretty much fine within the Venezuelan economy.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, venezuelainsider.com. Thanks again and have a nice day.